We are conditioned to treat data privacy as a strict binary, where processing begins and ends with a consent checkbox. But a strict consent mandate breaks down in the real world. The DPDP Act recognizes that requiring explicit consent for every action is physically impossible or logically flawed in specific scenarios. Section 7 provides the legal mechanism to process data without it. However, compliance teams frequently misinterpret how this mechanism operates. They try to apply a European privacy framework to an Indian law. Under the European GDPR standard, companies justify processing without consent via a legitimate interest test, weighing company needs against user rights. India's DPDP Act rejects this balancing test entirely. Section 7 replaces it with a closed list of 9 fixed legal grounds. There's no room for interpretation. If your processing doesn't map explicitly to predefined statutory grounds, doing it without consent is illegal. This strict boundary traps companies attempting to classify aggressive behavioral profiling or outbound marketing as a legitimate data use. Forcing non-exempt revenue-generating activities into this closed list bypasses the data principal's rights. Regulators treat this as a severe violation, carrying steep financial penalties. Section 7 offers a highly specific architectural boundary. Compliance requires exact operational mapping, not creative legal arguments. This grid visualizes the 9 legal grounds where processing without consent is lawful. Clause 7A covers voluntary provision, when a data principal provides data for a specific purpose and does not object. The architects reserve 3 specific slots exclusively for the government. Clause 7B allows the state to process data to issue subsidies, welfare benefits, or licenses, provided the individual previously consented or their data sits in a notified government database. Clause 7C permits processing necessary for the state to execute its legal functions, maintain sovereignty, and ensure national security. Clause 7D protects entities legally obligated to disclose information to the state. Clause 7E allows processing to comply with court judgments. The next 3 clauses form a cluster governing strict emergencies where prior consent is impossible. Clause 7F covers acute medical emergencies involving a direct, immediate threat to the life or health of any individual. Clause 7G stiddles that response up, allowing data processing necessary to deliver medical treatment during an epidemic or a severe public health threat. Clause 7H permits processing for safety or relief during a natural disaster. The final clause is 7I, which allows processing necessary for employment purposes. The statute specifically notes this includes safeguarding the employer from financial loss, investigating corporate espionage, or preventing intellectual property theft. Look closely at the board. For standard private sector operations, the entire matrix narrows down to these 2 critical clauses. Mapping operations to these distinct slots eliminates legal guesswork. It translates dense statutory text into a definitive IT decision matrix. To test this legal matrix, we must run complex, real-world corporate data flows through the system to see how classification works in practice. Case Study 1. A customer buys medication and gives the pharmacist her phone number for the sole purpose of receiving a digital payment receipt. This maps exactly to 7A voluntary provision. By recognizing the stated purpose, the pharmacy avoids building a disruptive, mandatory consent flow at the checkout counter just to send the receipt. Case Study 2. An unconscious patient arrives in an emergency room. Doctors pull his medical history from a centralized database. This triggers 7F medical emergency. Obtaining active consent is physically impossible, completely bypassing the requirement. Case Study 3. A citizen enrolls personal details into a government maternity scheme. The state uses 7B state benefit to lawfully process that data to verify eligibility for related welfare schemes, without requiring reconsent for every database check. Case Study 4. A corporation suspects an engineer of downloading proprietary code and launches a covert internal audit. Clause 7I, employment, allows processing the data to prevent financial loss. Asking for consent would tip them off, destroying the investigation. Classifying these edge cases accurately allows enterprise business operations to remain exceptionally fluid, fast, and completely legally compliant. Knowing the law is different from operationalizing it. Successfully invoking a Section 7 exemption requires strict internal protocols. First, compliance teams must document the exact applicable clause before any data processing begins. You cannot reverse engineer a legal justification after the fact. Second, apply a strict purpose lock. The legal exemption only covers the specific reason the data was collected. Any secondary use of that data requires a brand new lawful basis, which almost always means going back for consent. Third, remember that Section 7 only removes the consent step. It does not erase your core duties as a data fiduciary. You must still enforce stringent data security standards, honor data principal rights, and maintain an active grievance redressal mechanism. Fourth, enforce the strict prohibition against stretching the voluntary or employment clauses. If you use employee data or voluntary checkout data to run behavioral marketing campaigns, you are breaking the law. Finally, the legal burden of proof rests entirely on the data fiduciary. If the Data Protection Board initiates an inquiry, rigorous, auditable records showing exactly why a Section 7 ground applied are your only defense. Keep in mind that this analysis is educational content and does not constitute formal legal advice. To help operationalize these rules, we have linked a complete Section 7 decision checklist in the video description below. If your organization needs assistance mapping your specific processing activities to the correct lawful basis, the experts at Second Quadrant Consulting Solutions can audit and align your operations. Subscribe to the channel for further practical breakdowns of the DPDP Act. Precise mapping under Section 7 secures the organization against regulatory penalties and establishes a frictionless, legally sound data architecture.